First of all, welcome everyone to the TESOL Arabia Computer Assisted Language Learning Tech Talks, which is a series of webinars from all around the world. And today we're having a special guest who is Dr. Melanie Gobert. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Melanie. So
It's pronounced Gobert.
Gobert, in French. Okay, Melanie
Yeah,
Gobert.
French name. Yeah, it's a French name.
Yes. So I've known Melanie in many other backgrounds, but today Melanie is going to be with us with a special aspect in something that she's really keen on, which is podcast. So, a brief introduction to Dr. Melanie, who is the past president of TESOL Arabia from 2014 to 2015, and was the conference co-chair in 2015. And from 2019 to 2023, she was the editor of Perspectives, an English language teaching peer-reviewed journal from 2009 to 2014. She currently serves on the board of Educators Worldwide, which is a nonprofit based in California, and hosts a podcast called Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers. And what I know also about Melanie, is that she's based now in Indonesia. So without further ado, Melanie, the floor is all yours. And we're really, really so impatient to learn more about podcasting from your today's presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I won't say a lot more about myself, but I retired about 3.5 years ago after working in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates for about a couple of years of retirement. I started looking for a few things to do, to stay busy and keep my fingers in the pie, so to speak. So it was kind of a soft retirement. And of course, I still have been working with TESOL Arabia. And I kept getting LinkedIn saying, if you are on the board of a nonprofit, it makes you more hireable. And I got in my inbox, not from myself personally, but a call for expressions of interest from someone who's based in Saudi Arabia at, King Fahd Institute of Petroleum and Minerals, KFUPMG, I think it's called, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was for joining the board of this nonprofit that started a podcast called Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers, I think during COVID. And so I joined the board, and what they were looking for was someone to take over the hosting of the podcast. Now, this nonprofit was founded during COVID because, of course, as you know, not only did people not go to school and teach during this time, all remote learning and everything like that, but there's actually a lot of teacher development going on all around the world by profit organizations, including it's not a nonprofit one, I should say. Well, it is nonprofit. The one that I work for now, the U.S. State Department, as a fellow here in Indonesia, also does a lot of teacher training for teachers, particularly in developing countries or underserved countries. So that's how I became involved. Now, let me take you over to the podcast. It's hosted on Spotify, and we just got, I checked it today. It's actually winding down the podcast, but instead of me explaining and showing you lots of screens, I thought I would play this, what was your top episode in 2024? The Wrapped. It will give you a better summary than I could. So we'll watch this together for a few minutes. And I think you've seen people are putting their most played songs from Spotify, their most watched films from Netflix this year. I think I would be revealing too much about myself if I did that. Wrapped thing, and go back and show you the. Okay, so this is Spotify. We actually started this podcast on a platform called Anchor. And of course, when Spotify saw that Anchor was growing, they bought it. That was a whole transition. And I'll just show you a little bit. So this is our latest episode. You can see here, Explorations in English Literature. Not doing very well for playing, but if you look down, I think there's the more analytics they have here. I think it kind of makes sense because everybody's already in Christmas mode. This will kind of be the last event of this year, I think, for everything. So you can see like popular times were more in November, but we've had, 22,000 plays, 46 plays per episode is the average, the audience size, 33 in the last 30 days. And here you can see these most recent statistics. So I think that's probably very common, actually, around Christmas, unfortunately. So I want to show you some of the episodes. And I think they did change the platform a little bit when Spotify bought Anchor, but it's still pretty easy to upload an episode. And I actually upload the video on Spotify. But of course, when it's pushed, it's only the sound file that's pushed. So, here are some of the topics. And it's really good because, okay, for my experience, you can see the timing for most of these. I tell people it's a 10-minute interview because I feel like if podcasting go on, people don't listen. And of course, they might listen to Travis Kelce and his brother, but that doesn't mean they want to listen or watch something for 30 minutes or 45 minutes of talking head. So I always tell people it's a 10-minute interview. And sometimes I do have to stop them short. And you can see the variety of titles that we have here. And it's actually very easy. I'll just click on this one, Neuro-linguistic coaching, as an example. So it's a very easy interface to upload the podcast. So we don't have a setup where you do a podcast live and people are wearing headphones and there's two cameras, one pointing at you and one pointing at the other. Because this podcast was started during COVID and because there was no teacher training going on by the US Embassy and other places. And a teacher who now works for the US Embassy as a relo founded the nonprofit. And that was so that we could keep teacher development and helping teachers during that period of time when they were also isolated at home and not getting any professional development or a community. And I know that TESOL International was very active in that also. And I'm assuming that the Call Is Special Interest Group was as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you, I want to stop sharing that. I think I can just switch between these, right? So these are the wraps that are open, so I don't need those anymore. So what we do is, I invite people to participate in the podcast. And in my position or in my role as the program chair for TESOL Arabia for the past 2 years, I know all the presenters that are presenting. Because what was happening to the org. And when I took over, I thought about this for a while and I said, well, a lot of teachers present at TESOL Arabia, and maybe if I asked them, they would be happy to share what they were doing at TESOL Arabia. That means they didn't have to do extra work. They just had to talk on their presentation for 10 minutes. And this would be pushed to, we have about, I think, 450 followers or approximately 450 followers for the podcast. And it would be pushed to help them. So it would be like an opportunity to share their work with a wider audience, but it would also be a community service. Okay, so I sent an email to all of the presenters saying that it was a personal request from me on behalf of TTELT. And I explained about TTELT being a nonprofit in California that had a podcast that broadcasted to teachers in less resourced places than TESOL Arabia was, if any teachers would like to be interviewed for the podcast. And I did some interviews at TESOL Arabia, but most of the interviews I've scheduled and done just by Zoom. So and I have been satisfied with the quality. I've been satisfied with the sound quality. Haven't heard any complaints about that. Sometimes, because internet is unstable, especially in certain countries or places, sometimes the screen pixelates a bit, but overall I have been satisfied with it. So I'm going to take us now to our YouTube channel. So one thing that I like about Spotify and that I like about YouTube is that you can, before I joined and started doing the interviewing, they were scrappily trying to find somebody to interview each week and trying to work 2 or 3 weeks ahead for the next episode. But because I had a large body of people to ask if they wanted to participate, because I think we have, approximately 200 presenters at TESOL Arabia. And my goal was to do like a weekly episode for, the whole year. So I was hoping if I could get like 50 people. But the first year I asked, I had 75 people reply that they would be happy to do it. They would be interested in doing it. So I was really pleased and happy with that. And then the second year, I also called, and I had some returnees who did it a second time, but I also had many new people who were. So what I did was I scheduled interviews. I sent the blanket email asking people if they would like to be interviewed. I told them it would take 10 minutes. I explained it was a non-for-profit that was hosted on Spotify and YouTube, and that it was followed or broadcast to about 450 people living in less resourced places than the United Arab Emirates, certainly. And overwhelming response. And then I had to schedule the interviews, in 15-minute increments. Sometimes I would do like 8 interviews a day. So within a period of about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I could actually do, 52 episodes. So then I had to do a little bit of editing for each episode, from downloading it where it was recorded on Zoom, because I had to put an intro and an outro, I guess it's called, onto the video. And edit anything that was terrible at the beginning. My skills are quite limited for iMovie, but I can do a little bit. And I was actually just very, very happy. For me, it was super interesting because interviewing all those professionals in different parts of the world, on all kinds of teachers as well, both L1 English speakers and many, many L2 or L3 English speakers that were all highly qualified in their field. So I really liked getting to know the people myself, just to know what was going on in the ground all over the world and how dynamic and how empowering our profession is. And as I said before, one thing I definitely like about YouTube and Spotify is that you can upload the episodes in advance. Now I'll take you to this next page. This is the home page, I think, on YouTube. And there you can see we have like 473. So it's actually grown since the last time I looked. Now, I put this episode, it usually auto plays. And I put it here because, AI is the big thing. So if anybody's searching for it, but it's not my favorite episode. I'm going to take you to my favorite episode. My personal favorite. And I realize how important this has become since I've been working in Indonesia. And I'm not alone in Indonesia. I'm also working with 4 other fellows, and we're actually a group of 36 fellows assigned to the East Asia Pacific. So I'm my favorite episode, if I can find it. I hope I can find it. I hope I don't have to search for the episode. I hope I can just scroll. So I like know all of these people personally. It's a nice feeling. And I thought I could also ask, the VIP speakers at TESOL Arabia if they would like to participate in the podcast. But I had so many volunteers from normal speakers, from concurrent presenters, I didn't feel like I needed to ask them. Okay, this is one of my favorite episodes. I'm going to click on it. Okay, and this is Shahab Muradkhani, a professor in Iran, and he talked about English as an international language. And this is at a time when we're starting to hear like global English, or Saudi Arabian English, United Arab Emirates English, that there are global Englishes. But what he talked about was English as an international language, that we should be able to teach it without teaching the holidays, based of American culture, like Halloween. And I quite agree with those sentiments. It depends on your goals for learning English, what you're going to teach. It international language. But what he said was that he was teaching students from China. What's the date on this one? Can we see it there? We'll check. This is from a year ago, December 9th. Exactly a year ago. Okay. He was teaching Chinese students and Iranian students. And just imagine the situation the world is in now, okay? I think this was post invasion of Ukraine. And he was teaching Iranian students and Chinese students to communicate in English, not trying to teach the Chinese students Farsi, not trying to teach the Iranian students Chinese, but just using, English as the language of communication for those 2 very different groups of people. I thought this is very impressive, and he's right. We don't need to teach a lot of cultural baggage when we teach a language. It's my personal back on, I think, our homepage from Spotify, and all the episodes are there. Our newest one. Okay, now what I wanted to show you also, and this was actually going to be my introduction, and one of the reasons why I think this is so interesting. If you go to Spotify and you type in, of course you have to go to podcast, right? Because it starts a lot with music. Let me see if I can go back to that. Okay, so when you de facto go to Spotify, of course it's music, but they have taken over the podcast world. And if you search for English as a second language, you get podcast. Okay, you get and this has really increased in the 2 years since I've been doing it. Because a year ago when I checked, there was only, I don't know, 7 or 8 podcasts. The BBC, not the BBC, but the British Council had done a little bit, and Cambridge had done a little bit. But mostly what you have is, teachers doing podcasting to help their students master English. And of course, YouTube is a good channel for that too. I find lots of things on YouTube that I use with my students. Nice professional 5-minute videos for a change of pace. So you can see what they're about. Yeah, easy English expressions, English teacher. Okay, but there's actually no podcast like Teaching Tips for English Language Teachers, where one person interviews someone else about research that they're doing or a teaching technique that they're using, or just current issues in our profession, which I think people want to talk about. And a lot of these things we still don't talk about as much as we should, and we should talk about them more. So for some examples of this, we don't talk enough about the native, non-native speaker debate. I know that's precious to a lot of people's hearts, and all of us who are in the profession would agree that this is not what's important. It's important, how good of a teacher you are, not how native-like your accent is. And just because you're a native speaker doesn't make you a good teacher. So this is something that can be talked about on this type of podcast. So we do have these controversies in our field. Another controversy that I'm very aware of also is, is it Catrus's Circles of English? Was it his? The Circles of English in the middle? US, Canada, UK, Australia, maybe they let South Africa in as well. Ireland would claim a place. And then the outer circles, and those were always India and the Philippines. And now we have, the further out circle, which is being filled by global Englishes like Saudi English and etc. And I've always wondered since the beginning, why the second circle had India and the Philippines in it, especially India, because India, the area known in modern times as India, was actually colonized by the British before America or Australia were discovered. So then I think when we say that the of English is somehow not as good as in the inner circle, for me, it's very unfair, because then it just becomes a question of skin color and nothing else, I believe. And I think something like this should be talked about in our field and would make a very, very interesting podcast. Now, as you can see, all of this is Level Up English Fluency, Learn English Free. Nothing quite like TTELT exists. Let's try ESL, see what we get. Podcast. English as a second language. What's this about? For those wanting to learn or improve their English. I don't know how much play these podcasts get. I myself am not a podcast listener. I think all my years giving practice IELTS test or practice TOEFL test turned me off in a big way to listening to disembodied voices speaking. But I know a lot of people listen to podcasts in their cars and while they're at the gym. Put your hand up if you're a podcast listener. Yes, there are many. I wanted to try teaching tips. So we have some teaching tips here, maybe for general education. I don't know if teaching tips for English language teaching comes up here, but one search term I did made ours come up. Anyway, the existence of these podcasts have honestly more than quadrupled, okay? Like 100-drupled, if that's a word, since 2 years ago when I first looked. Let's see if it comes up. There, so finally popped up. But I think there's a lot of room, and I know what a lot of teachers want, and what they're interested in doing is making a podcast for their students. And I think that will be interesting also. Your students will be listeners for a while, but I think one of the reasons why podcasts become so successful is a group of people talking. It's not just one person talking. Like I feel like I'm doing today. I'm the only person talking. Okay, so after I had all these people volunteer to be interviewed for the podcast, shall I click on this? Okay, that's just our page that we looked at. So after I set up the Zoom interview and recorded it, I had to edit it by adding an intro and an outro. And then I learned also how to use Canva. Do you know Canva? Raise your hand if you know Canva. An Australian software, free for education. And the organization, Educators Worldwide, did make a brand standard. So this is like the Spotify ad and the the Instagram ad. Very easy with the titles. So, and I learned how to use Canva myself. I think it's a great tool. If you don't know about it and you decide to do a podcast or something like that, it really makes a very nice, you can see this is even just very that I've just taught my students how to make their CVs and do their LinkedIn profile. And that was all in Canva. And what they came up with was amazing. And I think now that Canva has AI in it for helping you make illustrations and things like that, it's a double extra great source. So down here, these smaller ones, I'm still sharing the right screen. Okay, this is my double people, yeah? This is my single people. So it's 56 episodes. I probably did those in a year. But I had some episodes where I interviewed 2 people because it was a co-presentation. So that's why they're a little different. So we had a special size also for Facebook landscape orientation instead of a portrait orientation. But one good thing about Canva is that it can resize different things. And also I post, so I manage the Facebook and the Instagram and LinkedIn accounts for TTELT. So I have to make these advertisements and then schedule them in advance, like the Spotify and YouTube. I can schedule all of those in advance for a release date. For that, except for the time it takes to upload on YouTube or Spotify can be quite an extended time if you don't have, I don't know, powerful enough internet. We used to say bandwidth, but I don't know if that's the correct term anymore. And so we also made I also make stories, because if you know anything about advertising on social media, you know that once you put a post, after you put hashtags with it, if you want to keep the post appearing in people's feeds, you need to have comments or likes. And the same thing for a story is only available 24 hours. So what I usually do, and that's why I have Meta Business opened. So what I usually do is, how do I organize it? Okay, let me take you first here to my Google Drive. Because where are you going to store all of this stuff if you're planning, 40 episodes ahead? Not on your desktop, I can assure you. So we use Google Drive for that. And, I number the episode and the date so I can find it easily. And then you can see what I've made on opens. So you can see that I've made a YouTube, what would you call it? Thumbnail. I've made a YouTube thumbnail on Canva. I made a Spotify thumbnail, which is also the Instagram thumbnail. And I've also made a story as well, so that I can schedule that to appear on Instagram and Facebook ahead of time. And then for the person, I'll just click on this one. So, her name at the top, the season. So there's 4 seasons now, and I have done the last 2 seasons, season 2 and season 3, the date that it's going to be shown. And I've already, put all of this stuff in there. So when it's time for me to upload the stuff on the things on Meta, I have it and I can just copy paste. I hope you're all following me and not bored. Hard when you're not sitting looking at a bunch of faces when you talk. Okay, so this is the last episode. So what I store on the Google Drive, I downloaded on my PC to re-upload in Meta. A restriction with this, the Facebook Meta Planner, you can only post 1 month in advance. You can't post more in advance than that. So whereas I can spend, 2 weeks or 3 weeks recording 40 interviews and then spend, a week uploading them on Spotify and YouTube, I can only upload what I need to upload on Facebook for advertising it on social media, 1 month in advance, which I think is a handicap, a disadvantage of Facebook. And Facebook and Instagram are uploaded separately for the post, because on Facebook you can put a link to the YouTube file. It used to show a preview, but now, YouTube is owned by Google and Facebook is owned by Meta. So, I should say YouTube is not owned by Google. I think it's owned by ABC or something like that is the name of the company. So, of course, they friendly all the time. So now if you put a link on, you can still put a link on Facebook, but it will no longer give you the preview. But if you try to put a picture, it won't give you the link. So then, what I copied and pasted from the description, I put on Facebook. And one advantage for Facebook is that if you are a member of different groups, like, public groups like, English teachers worldwide or something like that, you can post not only for your followers, but you can also post in the groups that you're a member of. So then you can try to widen your audience organically, yes? And then, but on Instagram, you don't have that opportunity to post in other groups, but you can put a picture. So I do it separately. And then the story is something I made on Canva, a little animation to keep it in people's feed during that week. Now, I think that's just about all. Now I'm sharing my screen about the meeting. I think that's just about all I wanted to talk about. So, and again, you can do so much more because you can invest in equipment to have, I don't know. I gave a podcast at the American phones on. I had a giant microphone right in front of my mouth. I had a camera filming me the whole time I talked, and a camera filming the other guy the whole time I talked. But I don't think you need to start off a podcast thinking that you need all of those tools, because I just made this podcast on my on Zoom on my PC, and I think it worked well enough. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I've shared my experience of podcasting. So now if you have questions, if you think there's a way to go, I mean, I would really like to see a better podcast that will attract more people to listen. And I think if we did talk about some controversial or new topics in our field, that this would resonate with a lot of people. And like I did retire a few years ago, and AI was invented 2 years ago. Now I'm back in the classroom. So this is my first experience with my students using AI to cheat so badly. Okay. But at the same time, I discovered that I can use Cam Scanner to scan all my students' papers in 20 minutes and upload it to AI with a rubric, ask AI to grade it. So there are advantages and disadvantages for AI. And I think teachers want to talk about these things, but we're not talking about them because we're too busy teaching. And of course, nowadays we're too busy doing so much administrative work as well, right?
Thank you so much, Melanie. And I allow myself to share maybe some experience from the MENA region. I'm not sure if you know Educast or maybe the Ikigai and Kaizen podcast. It started first by sharing teacher tips. And now, let's say the Ikigai podcast is more into coaching and career development. But Educast, I think, still focuses. Educast started with Mohammed Nabil. And it focuses still on the teacher experience. And also the AI podcast, I invite you also to listen to my AI podcast that I started with my students. I dropped the link in the chat, and it was accepted in Japan. And published as an article as part of social emotional learning. So students like podcasting a lot. And now I'm integrating more of this. And what you do, I remember still your email that you shared with me as well with TESOL Arabia. But we did not get the chance to record the episode yet. So everybody, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question and drop your comments to Dr. Melanie. Today's session is really exceptional talking about podcasting. So please, let's check the chat. I think Amir Ali Mahar said it's a wonderful and very informative presentation. We all agree with you, Amir. It really learned a lot about tools and their help for our society. Thank you very much, Dr. Melanie. So I also share some comments from Ambreen Salman. He also thinks that it's an insightful session. Also, you shared a lot of nice tools, Melanie, and your way of organizing things. So I let you really interact with the audience. If you have some questions, please do not hesitate to unmute yourself and ask your questions to Melanie. So there's a question: is Spotify still free, Melanie?
Yeah, I think it's free. Yeah, it's free to have an account because the Spotify model is like, it's not exactly the YouTube model because now we have to have a subscription if we don't want the ads, right? But Spotify, how you would make money from that is if you get a lot of followers, right? You could make your followers pay a subscription. Like can you do that also on YouTube? Do you,
Yes, yes, yes. I think for YouTube, there's even a
yeah.
section for podcasts. Spotify, yeah, still free. Thank you,
Yeah,
Melanie.
there's a small thing on the left sidebar of Spotify that says monetize.
Yes.
So I think you want to get a lot of followers and then you'll get product placement. And I mean, like, I have met an influencer personally, a young woman from Bulgaria. She had about 43,000 followers. And how she makes money is, product placement in her social media.
Yeah, that's how it's done on YouTube as well. You get to do
But you can
videos.
I mean, TESOL Arabia has a YouTube channel, and we have been doing hybrid. So we have recorded Zoom sessions, and all of those, I ask people if they agree for it to be hosted on YouTube. And then after TESOL Arabia, I release the episodes one by one and push it out on TESOL Arabia's social media as well. And now on TESOL Arabia's Facebook page, we have over 10,000 followers. We're getting close to 11,000 followers. But still, if you actually look at the numbers of people who watch or who watch all the way through, it's not that high. We have
So,
to
Melanie,
do more exciting things or become.
Melanie, do you find that there are more listeners on your podcast than on YouTube, than viewers on YouTube?
It's about the same.
Oh, okay.
And it's pushed out both ways, yeah. And the good thing about Spotify also is that it's like automatically pushed to, you can automatically push it to various social media. So I don't automatically have it pushed to Facebook and Instagram because I do that myself using Meta, but it's automatically pushed to Twitter. But I actually don't use Twitter and don't go on there very often anymore.
That's because it's X now, maybe.
For reasons that won't be named.
Well, anyway,
Previous,
it's called X. There's a question there by Amir that anyone can answer.
previously known as Twitter. Finally, they have started calling it X. They're all afraid of Elon Musk.
There's a question there by Amir. He's asking, what is the difference between Spotify and YouTube? Which one is easy? You can answer that since you have both, Melanie.
Yeah, Spotify is sound files, but YouTube is video files as well. But when I put it on Spotify, I put the video file, but it extracts the sound file automatically from it. When you record on Zoom, it will give you a sound file and a video file. So you could just download the sound file and then push the sound file to Spotify. But that's like a duplication of work for me, because what I saw when I started interviewing for this organization is that this was not run very efficiently. This would take up get the next episode up, and then sometimes they miss an episode. So for me, I think that, I mean, a lot of people will do podcasts with their students as well over one semester. There's a lot of challenges. But I think maybe we need to think more about, what are we doing this podcast for? What do we want to accomplish with it? And for me, this interview format of these teachers from all over the world, and there were some L1 English speakers, but there were a lot of L2 English speakers, or L3 or 4 English speakers, okay? And for me, it just really shows how much of an international language English is, that it really is a lingua franca that the whole world can communicate in. I'll also give you another big example of a controversy. Here I am in Indonesia, and these Indonesians all feel like their English is subpar. People think they have speaking anxiety, and they are very, very shy to speak at the beginning. but that's because they have this in their mind that their English is somehow subpar. And it's like, no, you guys' English is pretty good. And a lot of the teachers have gotten their masters or PhDs in, L1 English countries. So I don't understand why they have this mindset. So for me, that's a controversy as well. Why some people should feel like, oh, their English is not that good. And I mean, I speak French and Dutch, and they're both horrible. And I make a lot of mistakes, and my accent's terrible. But I don't feel like I'm subpar when I speak those languages.
Maybe it's a
I think,
cultural thing. Some
yeah,
people are more, humble in their ways, I guess their upbringing and so on, and some are not. So it depends. I think it's a
this is
cultural.
definitely what,
There's
but I think we need to empower people positive about
definitely
their English, realize that English is a global language, and it's fine if you have an accent. People who speak English as their L1 also have an accent. We have really thick, heavy regional accents in whichever country we come from.
good point. Nabiha, would you like to? Nabiha has something to say.
Yes,
We'd
thank you
love to
so
see
much.
you if that's possible.
Yes, first I want to thank you so much, Dr. Melanie, for this insightful tech talk. Personally, I've learned a lot, as this is something that I haven't much used with my own learners, and I look forward to trying it out and see how it goes. My main the learners who I teach are mainly graduate students, so I would like to challenge myself and look up for, like it's going to be more challenging when it comes to tasks. So I want to see how that would go with them. First, I want to thank everyone as well who attended today's Tech Talk, and we really would like to know your feedback, what you thought of our Tech Talk, and what you would like to learn from us in the future. We did post the link to the survey in the chat box. If you could please click on it and let us know what you think.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So Nabiha is coming to us from Lebanon. So we've got the whole world here, actually. I think the Far East, Middle
Nabiha,
East, Africa, and North America, as well as South America.
I would like to make two comments. One of the interviews I did recently was a young woman who is a master's student at the American University of Sharjah. And she talked about doing reflective writing with her students. And I did reflective writing way back in the day when I was an undergraduate studying English. And I said, yeah, that's what we should be doing. We should be doing reflective writing with our students. So I taught 3 writing classes this semester, and I did reflective writing with all of them at the beginning of class for 20 minutes. That is something we should be doing. So that's one way you can use what they're doing or what they think or believe. And the other thing that I've noticed, what's working for me now with my very shy to speak Indonesian students is role plays. And that's got to be the same like puppetry. So if your students are doing podcasts, then they're someone else. It's like a role play. And that makes students less shy to speak.
Yeah, that's what I did with it reminds me of my students who are really, really shy, young learners. What I did with them was they would hide behind their sofas at home, and they would, they would put their puppets up and speak like that. So they would be hiding and using their puppets. So I think that's probably a good idea for adults as well.
What I'm getting to see with young people, and I've organized also like a ELTPD in Ambon for teachers. And of course, none of the university lectures are coming because they already know everything. But the in-service teachers are coming that teach in high schools and junior high schools, and they are young. And they are struggling also. They are struggling with what to do in the classroom to keep those young people interested and motivated to learn. And they want to practice their English, and they are very much motivated by these topics. And they are motivated by things like, what does that really mean, second language acquisition? And one young woman was presenting, it means don't test grammar anymore. Don't teach map-fill grammar. Just play some games and sprinkle some grammar out there, and eventually they will acquire it. And that's a new way to start thinking. Has dominated everything we do in this field for so long, and everything in communicative language teaching is not good, like the English only in the classroom policy.
Great points, Melanie. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So how can a potential speaker get to you? I mean, I'm sure there are teachers here that are very interested in sharing what they do in their classrooms and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So how can they get in touch?
The old-fashioned for this, the best way for something like this is still email, not WhatsApp. We use WhatsApp for every single thing here, but messages tend to get lost. So you can share my email. If anybody is interested in doing a podcast or being interviewed for a podcast, they can email me.
Great. All right, so we'll be sharing the email with anyone who's interested. Feel free to contact us, Yusra, Nabiha, or I.
But I do encourage everybody to also use podcast in their teaching or start their own podcast. I did meet a young woman at TESOL Arabia who podcast for her students, and she podcast about her life and her culture. My students probably get enough of that in the classroom. So
thank you. Thank you once again, Melanie, and thank you everyone for being here today. And the recordings will be available and you will get your certificates. So check your email, check your spam box in case it lands there. Bye for now. Thank you.